The people who have given you the most confident advice in your life had the least to lose if they were wrong. That is not a coincidence. That is the structure of how advice works. And you have been treating their confidence as evidence of something it was never evidence of. You trusted someone, maybe a mentor, a manager, a financial contact, a friend who had done something similar and told you exactly how to do it too. They were persuasive. They knew the language. They had done it before, or knew someone who had, and the way they spoke made the uncertainty feel smaller than it was. You followed the advice, you made the move. And somewhere between the conversation and the outcome, the gap appeared. Not because they lied to you, not because they were stupid, but because the thing that was at stake for them when they gave that advice was nothing. Their life looked exactly the same the day after you took their recommendation, regardless of what happened to you. They were not bad people. They were in a situation that produced bad advice almost automatically. And you had no way to tell, in the moment, that you were in that situation at all. That feeling of being let down without being betrayed is a specific kind of experience, and it has a structure. The rule is this: never weight advice by how confident someone sounds. Weight it by how much of their own skin is in the same outcome. When someone has genuine exposure to the downside of being wrong, their advice changes. Not because they become smarter, because they become honest in a way that costless advice never forces anyone to be. Think about what happens to a recommendation when the person making it will feel the consequence of a bad outcome alongside you. Every qualification they glossed over becomes worth saying. Every risk they would have waved away becomes worth naming. The advice does not get worse, it gets accurate. Because accuracy, when you bear no cost for being wrong, is optional. When you share the downside, accuracy becomes the only rational position. You can call this the skin in the game problem. The person advising you carries none of the risk if they turn out to be wrong, so their advice is shaped by what sounds good, what feels helpful, what protects the relationship, not by what is true. Your doctor who recommends a procedure they will not personally perform on their own family member. Your real estate agent whose commission exists only if the sale closes. The consultant who charges by the hour regardless of the outcome. None of them are dishonest. All of them are operating inside a structure that quietly bends their advice away from your interests and toward a version of events that serves theirs. In the summer of 1346, the Genoese trading company, operating the Black Sea port of Kaffa, in what is now Crimea, employs agents whose job is to assess the safety of trade routes. Reports of illness spreading from Central Asia have been reaching the port for months. The agents assess the situation and advise that trade routes remain open and viable. The advice is commercially motivated. Closing the routes costs the company money. The agents bear no personal exposure to the disease. They are advising from inside an office about a risk they will not personally carry. The Mongol army besieging the port is already dying from the plague. They catapult infected corpses over the walls. The Genoese traders who survived the siege board their ships and sail west, carrying the illness into Sicily, then Italy, then France, then England. Somewhere between a third and half of Europe dies over the next 5 years. The advice to keep the routes open was not given by people who would sail those routes. The people who gave the advice did not board the ships. The people who paid the cost of that advice were not in the room when it was made. The structure of that room, where advice is given by people who do not share the outcome, is not a medieval problem. It is the default structure of almost every advisory relationship that exists today. The deeper problem is not that people with nothing at stake give bad advice. It is that they give advice that sounds exactly like good advice. The same words, the same logic, the same calm authority. You cannot tell from the surface of a recommendation whether the person making it has any exposure to being wrong. And so you have been using the wrong signal. You have been listening for confidence and competence when you should have been looking for exposure. This pattern repeats across every domain where advice is separated from consequence. In the lead-up to the French involvement in Vietnam in the early 1950s, the senior military advisors recommending escalation were not the men who would fight the battles. The colonial administrators advising Paris that the situation was manageable were not stationed in the villages where it was not manageable. They advised from distance, with careers that advanced when the recommendation was well received, not when it was accurate. The soldiers in the field had a different view. Nobody in Paris was asking them, "You are trusting people right now whose advice costs them nothing to give. Your financial advisor who earns a fee whether your portfolio grows or shrinks. The colleague who recommends a career move they would never make themselves but sounds very certain it is right for you. The friend who told you to take the risk they never took. Their advice might be good, it might be accurate, but you have no way to tell, because you are using confidence as your filter, and confidence is entirely available to people who have nothing riding on the outcome. Watch what people do with their own money, their own time, and their own reputation when no one is watching. That is the version of their judgment you are actually getting access to when they advise you. The version they perform in conversation is not the same thing. A person who gives you a strong investment recommendation but holds their own savings in low-risk instruments is showing you something. The words say one thing, the position says another. The position is the honest one. Stop filtering advice through how it sounds and start asking one question instead. What happens to this person if they are wrong and I follow their advice? If the answer is nothing, weight their recommendation accordingly, not as worthless, but as untested, as advice that has never been under pressure from the one thing that produces honest counsel, which is consequence. What you give up is the comfort of trusting confident people. Confidence is a skill. Some people are extraordinarily good at sounding sure. Taking that skill away as a signal for reliability is disorienting, because it removes one of the fastest ways humans have for deciding who to listen to. What you get in return is something more useful. You stop being surprised when confident advice turns out to be wrong. You start noticing the small signals that indicate whether someone's judgment has ever been tested by genuine cost. And you begin to find, slowly, the smaller group of people whose track record of being right is built on the fact that being wrong was never an option they could afford. The person who advised you walked away from that conversation unchanged. You are the one who had to live with what they said. You knew this already, somewhere. The problem is that knowing it and building your life around it are two different things. Most people never close that gap. Next video. The most trusted voices in any field tend to be the ones who have been most insulated from the consequences of being wrong. There is a specific reason why institutions produce confident incorrectness at scale, and why the people closest to the actual risk almost never get the platform. The gap between who gets listened to and who has earned the right to be listened to is wider than you think. It has been widening your entire life.